So I see some of you are still enjoying your croissants and coffee, tea, which you should continue to do. But we will also continue with the next presentation, which is by Anna Santomauro. Hi, Anna. How are you doing?
Hi. How is everyone?
We are very good, thank you. We've had a wonderful day so far, and we're so sorry that you couldn't be with us in person.
I know, I'm gutted. I'm really, really sorry too.
Yeah, so Anna was scheduled to come here yesterday morning and fell sick. So we are doing a last-minute online presentation, even though we had planned to have absolutely no online presentations. And if we had planned this in advance, we could have also included more of the Soil Futures partners in that presentation. But you are going to present the group, in a sense. Yeah, Anna, so I will give you a quick introduction, and then the floor is yours. So Anna Santomauro is a curator and researcher in micropolitics and situated ecological practices. She joined the UK arts organisation Arts Catalyst as curator in 2017 and was appointed Senior Research Fellow at Sheffield Hallam University in 2022. And she's also a PhD candidate at the University of Wolverhampton. Her role at Arts Catalyst involves developing and delivering artist projects and commissions, among others the Soil Futures project, which she will be talking about today. She's also co-founder of Vessel in Bari, a non-profit arts organization dedicated to public programming in relation to contemporary social, political, and economic issues. And Vessel is one of the organizations also involved in the Soil Futures program. So Anna, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please give her a warm welcome. Sorry, Anna.
Oh. Thank you. That's encouraging. Thank you so much for the introduction, and also thank you for organizing this gathering, Nora and the whole NOBA team. It's very important at this particular time to have soil focused gatherings and conversations. And it has been a real pleasure to be in dialogue with you over the past year around this gathering that unfortunately I can't attend in person. So I will be speaking for around 30 minutes about the Soil Futures Network, some of its actors and its first year of programming that emerged from the network itself. And then hopefully there will be a little bit of time for questions in the end. But before delving into Soil Futures, I would like to acknowledge that this presentation was always meant to be a conversation and a dialogue with other partners. But as you've mentioned, Nora, there have not been the conditions for that to happen. So I just wanted to stress that Soil Futures was conceived and developed as a collective endeavor. And since the outset, the contribution of each partner has played a vital role in the project. And I wanted to stress that because in this presentation, I'm not trying to attempt to speak on behalf of the network or of other partners, but instead I will be sharing with you the journey of the past year from the two positions that I do inhabit, which is within Arts Catalyst and within Vessel Art Project. So I will be referring to materials that the constituents of Soil Futures have shared with Arts Catalyst over the past year. And you will see there will be a bit of text, images, reports, and notes, which will emerge throughout the presentation and that I will be reading from. So the network was initiated in 2022 by Arts Catalyst, and so I thought that maybe to start with, I can give you a bit of an overview of Arts Catalyst, as many of you might not be familiar with it. So Arts Catalyst is a visual arts organization and a charity based in Sheffield in the UK. And we enable people in South Yorkshire, which is the region where Sheffield is based, and beyond, to engage in creative experiences that increase ecological awareness, encourage positive social action, and open up new ways of learning about the world around us. And we enable people in South Yorkshire, which is the region where Sheffield is based, and beyond, to engage in creative experiences that increase ecological awareness, encourage positive social action, and open up new ways of learning about the world around us. Arts Catalyst was founded in 1994. It was based in London for 26 years, and then in 2020, we moved to Sheffield. And since 2014, our focus has shifted from a very specific dialogue between art and science, which has very much marked the first couple of decades of Arts Catalyst work, or around the first 15 years, to a more rooted approach where we embed our work in places and try and address the ways in which local environmental challenges and their social impacts are connected to the wider climate crisis. To do so, we collaborate with artists, activists, interest groups, and people with different kinds of expertise on long-term artistic projects and programs that support critical thinking, creative exploration, and alternative ways of learning about issues at hand. So while today the organization has kind of evolved from that art and science approach for a more site-responsive way of working, I guess the dialogue between different disciplines and different fields of knowledge is still remaining central to the way we work. And we usually define our approach as transdisciplinary. So for us, working in a transdisciplinary way doesn't mean moving away from specialist knowledge and giving up on it completely. Instead, inspired by theorist Isabel Stengers, we aim at working towards an ecology of practices where all forms of knowledge are valued equally and can coexist in a process of mutual learning and transformation. These ideas have deeply informed Arts Catalyst approaches, and they have meant that the particular social, ecological, political, and economic conditions of given landscapes or contexts that we engage with can only be investigated together with the communities who inhabit them and who have lived experience and situated knowledges of such places and issues. Now, this tends to manifest itself throughout long-term projects, and it is very hard to predict what each project will bring at the outset, because it is in a way the result of the entanglements, relationships, and negotiations that happen and are enabled through the ecology of practices itself. Over the past few years, Arts Catalyst has dedicated greater attention to working hyperlocally in the region of Yorkshire with artists and local communities within different particular segments of the region. So for instance, we have been developing projects around water stewardship and water governance alongside rivers that have been affected by floods. We have been collecting stories from local and planetary wetlands that are under threat in the region, working with artists, A Place of Their Own, and Gary Stewart. We have been repairing and reshaping an urban garden with artist Haran Morrison. We've been exploring material histories of industrial and extractive sites in the Peak District with artist Rachel Pym, and working with artist Babak Hashemi-Nezad in collaboration with an asylum seekers and refugee center in Sheffield, working together towards imagining a non-hostile environment for Sheffield. But while working so hyperlocally, we still believe in the potentiality for artistic practice to build solidarity and alliances beyond our local context. And it is on this very premise that Soil Futures came about. So our work in the context of environmental issues and the environmental crisis is inspired by the notion of planetary health, which in the definition provided by the Lancet Commission is based on the understanding that human health and human civilization depend on flourishing natural systems and the wise. So in response to the degradation and impoverishment of such natural system, we became interested in exploring forms of stewardship based on commoning practices. According to political economist Massimo De Angelis, the commons need three things in order to thrive. First, a common pool of resources. Second, a community to create and sustain the commons. And finally, a commoning practice. Curator and writer Nicola Triscott describes a commoning practice as the processes and struggles to access, share, and care for the resources that sustain a community. Tactics of commoning involve drawing together a network of relationships toward mutual support and stewardship of our environment. Introducing the concept of planetary in this context suggests a focus on practices that operate at multiple scales, from the planetary to that of locality or place, as well as on the legal and institutional structures that support them. Soil Futures emerged from the shared desire among 5 organizations to explore, make space, and in some cases mobilize and stimulate planetary commoning practices and forms of wise stewardship of soils across different geographies. In particular, where human activities such as monoculture and intensive exploitation, pollution, land grabbing, climate change have caused damage, degradation, and impoverishment of soils for decades. Soils host at least 1/4 of all living organisms on the planet, and the health of their complex habitats affects human health and the life of other species. Through the network and the attached program, we wanted to learn more about ways of living with and learning from soils, together with those who look after and care for them. So the organizations involved are Arts Catalyst in Sheffield, REWAC in Al-Birain, Palestine, Sakia, Art, Science and Agriculture in Kenya, in Palestine, Struggle for Sovereignty in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and Vessel Art Project in Puglia, in Italy. We were particularly interested in the curatorial and pedagogical resonances within the network, despite the very different geographies that we operate within and the different approaches and strategies that we all adopt as part of our respective ecological and social practice. So as you will see, as soon as we start exploring the different elements of the Soil Futures program, as a network, we decided very consciously from the outset that the emphasis should be on the process rather than on the outputs, as we really wanted to open up a generative space for learning, questioning, testing, and sharing. So I'm going to read the description of each of the different organizations from the text that they've provided, and I've also taken a few images from the websites. So I apologize if I'm not able to speak very eloquently and in a very articulate way about their work. So Sakia is a progressive academy for experimental knowledge, production and sharing, grafting local agrarian traditions of self-sufficiency with contemporary art and ecological practices. They run an interdisciplinary residency program where cultural actors such as farmers, crafts, small industry initiatives assume a prominent role alongside visiting and local artists and scholars. Sakia's core programs engage food production, exhibitions, symposia, publications, and education and training workshops, exploring the intersections between art, science, and agriculture in a sustainable and replicable model. REWAC, Center for Architectural Conservation, is an NGO established in 1991 in an effort to preserve the cultural heritage in Palestine. It was the preservation of peasant architecture and cultural heritage that influenced the center's agenda and vision for 30 years. In 2017, REWAC initiated its project in rural Jerusalem, the Life Jacket, the restoration and regeneration of rural Jerusalem, rendering the villages surrounding the city of Jerusalem with the agricultural produce, the labor force and services, a sort of life jacket to the city itself. Struggles for Sovereignty, Land, Water, Farming, Food is a collective platform focusing on the intersections of social and ecological justice, organized by bodies of power, powerful bodies, and Badukapan Food Study Group, based in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. They develop programs both online and offline that bring together communities working from the fields of art, food, farming, land rights, indigenous and ecological activism to share their work and context with each other and the public. Through the programs, they aim to build lasting solidarity between groups in Indonesia and around the world, while engaged with struggles for the rights to self-determination of the basic resources that our individual and collective bodies need. And finally, Vessel is a nomadic curatorial organization and agency invested in supporting artistic and curatorial practices that are situated, responsive, and research-led. Vessel's work is based in Puglia, in the southeast of Italy, driven by a biographical and epistemological belonging to the South, Southern Europe and Mediterranean regions in particular, and embedded in an ongoing act of hosting and being hosted. Vessel's practice manifests itself through public programming, commissioning, and writing. Far from representing the rural identity of this region through a nostalgic approach and through the myth of an exotic, slow life, over the past 12 years, Vessel has sought to enhance the complexity of this territory and of its histories, from the impact of the fascist territorial plans that have deeply modified the configuration of the area, to the effects of monoculture on impoverished soils and often exploitative farming industries. Soil Futures views soil and those looking after it, both human and non-human, as active agents of change and resistance in the face of current geopolitical and environmental crises. The project key questions are: what nutrients are necessary for soils to thrive? What practices of care and maintenance are enacted across different territories and cultures? What ecological knowledges and approaches nourish both lands and communities? So over the course of a year, this collective endeavor took the shape of a program featuring an artist residence exchange, specifically between Palestine, Southern Italy, and the UK, an online school, a podcast series, and a season of distributed local gatherings. Grounded in the localities where each organization is based, this hybrid, both in real life and online program, created an intercultural exchange between artists, ecologists, activists, and soil caretakers to collectively mobilize existing and future knowledges of soil. So in terms of the artist residency, as I mentioned, it did happen primarily between Palestine, Southern Italy, and the UK. And following an open call, we selected 3 artists and artist collectives to join the program. So those were Al-Wahat, from whom I think you just heard from, Marie Hervé, who is an artist based between Italy and France, and Ragazza Kfalait, who is an artist based in Palestine, in Ramallah. And each of them worked very closely with the organization that was hosting them, as well as the different communities that exist and that operate ecologically on a local scale. And those encounters and those dialogues were very much the driving force of the residency. So I'm going to say a few words about each of the residencies, primarily in relation to Marie Hervé and Ragazza Kfalait's residencies, because I suppose you heard already from Al-Wahat over the last few minutes. So the residency that Marie Hervé undertook at RIWAC was titled Recollections, and it very much sat within the Life Jacket project that I mentioned earlier when I introduced RIWAC. So in response to the fragmentation brought by the Israeli occupation in the Jerusalem area, RIWAC has been it's been creating a number of different interventions, but also they have been building a large body of research around common histories of villages of rural Jerusalem. So in a way, Marie's residency contributed to this work through digging deeper into informal resources of knowledge, acknowledging local know-how, and revealing the vanishing networks of livelihood that was once the backbone of Jerusalem's agrarian communities. So the residency took place between November and December 22, and it explored the notion of conservation and memory of stone in rural Jerusalem. The project traced the history of stone in Calandia's village, a site that was known for its stone artisans and local quarries. And the residency started by digging deeper into the archives and then conducting a series of workshops with local people. The workshops took place in both Calandia and Aljib villages, where school students and village residents shared their family archives and photographs to retell the story of the place from the perspective of the stone. By the end of the residency, Marie shared her research through a public intervention at a residency space where materials, stone samples, photographs, and narratives all ended up being open for Calandia's community to engage with and build on. During the residency with Vessel Art Project in Puglia, which by the way also happened in collaboration with another organization called Cora Art Center, which is based in Puglia, in November and December 22, Ragad Sakfalait developed the project on clay ecologies, which is part of a larger body of work around the environmental, social, and cultural significance of clay in Palestine first, and then in Puglia through the residency that Ragad has been developing over the years. Her research looks at the traditional cycles of pottery production in agrarian communities and how they are rooted in the situated knowledge of geology, of the geology of a place, and of the specific quality of soil. The craft follows a long process that starts from the depths of the ground. So when the potter or farmer first identifies the soils that are suitable for manipulation on the wheel. And so this ongoing process entails an engagement with what lies underneath and above the ground. So the deeper the clay is underground, the purer and better it gets. And that, in the specific context of Puglia, costed the lives of many farmers during the last centuries, specifically in the area where Ragad was conducting her research, which is very rich in clay and where you can still visit some clay quarries. So the residency started with Ragad exploring books at various local libraries during the first couple of weeks. And here she learned about the process of manual extraction of clay from the underground cavities. And here, just reading a bit of text that she shared with us. It raised my curiosity around this contrasting relationship between the above and below ground. The pressure of the groundwater that caused the clay caves to collapse, causing fatal accidents, contrasted to the dryness of the Earth's surface, with the groves of olive trees and vineyards dotting the southern place of Cutrofiano and the excavated material tunnels just underneath them. Here, historically, quarrymen would offer landowners half the price to access land to buy only the underground. Unlike the case of Aljib in Palestine, where the historical clay quarries were buried to make way for colonial expansion, I was able to see signs of extraction exposing the marine origins that characterized the entire countryside of Puglia. This encounter opened new horizons when thinking of clay and the organic substances it holds. I started seeing the material as a witness and preserver of the memory of the earth, end quote. So the artist, throughout the residency, developed this process of collection of clay, but also of local situated knowledges. And also in the case of Ragad, there were a series of workshops that she developed throughout the residency to open up different methods and different tools to the local communities and to invite the local communities to share their methods and their knowledges and memories of clay. Here is an image from Al-Wahat's residency. And then I thought it would be interesting to focus a little bit more about on the School of Soil Futures, which is another key segment, another key part of the infrastructure of this network. The school is an online initiative between Arts Catalyst and Struggle for Sovereignty, and it brought together on Zoom artists, artists, ecological activists, community organizers, soil caretakers, and other working on social and ecological justice from across the world. So the school was shaped around 6 online gatherings, and each of them was led by 1 or 2 contributors that we defined as knowledge holders and space holders, as we invited the contributors to not only share the knowledge, but also to share different tools and ways to hold space, specifically within the online environment. And so each of the sessions encompassed a multiplicity of perspectives, from the microbiological dimension to land-based practices, from acts of reparation and healing to modes of resistance and storytelling. So what brought them all together was the commitment of every person involved, both as participants as well as knowledge or space holders. We were interested in their commitment to their own locality and soil, and to the sense of generosity through which they were sharing their methods, their approaches and tools, starting from the very geographies that they inhabit. So we ended up sharing an open call for participation, and we selected a cohort of around 14 participants from different parts of the world. So I thought it would be interesting to maybe tell you a little bit more about each of the sessions, because as I mentioned earlier, the pedagogical aspect of Soil Futures is very much key, and both the knowledges that are mobilized as well as the ways in which those knowledges are shared and distributed have pretty much equal weight and have equal importance in the network, and specifically within the school. So the first session was led by a researcher and writer and curator called Brigitte Isabella, based in Indonesia. And that was very much of a way for the 14 participants to get to know each other and talk more about their own individual practices. Participants were asked to bring 2 pictures of objects or things, one that would represent the participant's practice itself, and the other one to represent hopes and values that they wanted to share and reciprocate throughout the school sessions. So we were, in a way, sat around this imaginary table where objects were carefully placed and put in dialogue with each other by each participant, everyone contributing to this sort of feast of objects and images that were full of symbolic and affective meanings. The second session was titled Living Soils and was led by nature guide, forager, writer and community gardener Maimana Arifin, and it explored with participants networks of solidarity and mutual aid existing within soils as ways to envision more than just collaborations between humans and non-humans. The sessions were centered around a few questions, including: what is your first memory of soil? If soil were a person you were meeting for the first time, what characteristics would they have? Is soil a medium, a space, a collection, a vessel, a material? What does soil hold? The third session was around agroecologies, and we got to learn about 2 communities and the regeneration of situated agrarian practices and endemic plant species. So the sessions were led by Dia Vidurentno, who is the founder of Sekolah Pachezangan, and Vivian Sansur, who is the founder of Palestine Heirloom Seed Library, who shared with participants practices and pedagogies in which tending to land is strictly linked to learning from it. So Dia introduced the work with Sekolah Pajagansan in Vintaus in Indonesia, where she practices contextual education to engage young people in agriculture and food-related issues. The majority of the younger generations tend to leave the villages and move to cities where they can find employment, specifically in the informal sector. So in this way, a generation of farmers is lost. So the school seeks to reconnect children and young people to soil and to land. Vivian Sansour's contribution instead started from reflecting on loss and grief as a result of the state of the world we live in. And while acknowledging what is lost, whether it is livelihoods, seeds, knowledge, etc., and whether it happens through military action or capitalist extractive dynamics, Vivian reflected on the role of our ancestors, whose seeds we are. Through a form of storytelling that felt simultaneously intimate and political, she shared significant moments and encounters throughout her practice, and particularly with women who have looked after seeds over a long period of time, and who have found and taught her ways to plant stories and feed them to others. In the following sessions, we also looked at repair and reparation, and that particular session happened with the contribution of Valiana Aguilar from Sumil Mokhtan, which is a collective based in the Yucatan Peninsula, working to repair the ancestral land by reintroducing Mayan knowledge systems, and Sam Siva from Land in Our Names, Lion, a grassroots Black-led collective committed to reparations in Britain by connecting land and climate justice with racial justice. So the facilitators in this context centered the conversation particularly around racial and environmental justice, foregrounding the experience of those whose ancestors' relationship with land has been deeply affected by colonialism and exploitation. And then the school culminated in the final session that was led by artist Duo Breakwater, Tae Yue and Young Suk Choi, and that looked at different forms of care and health in ecological activism. And that was building in from the knowledge and the practice in the context of the relationship between ecology and mental health, which starts from the perspective that mental health is a collective responsibility that should be enacted through, and I'm quoting them, slow, empathetic, and ecological processes, positioning nature and time as key healers. So there are other elements to the program that still need developing. We recently, on the 6th of October, we held a gathering in Sheffield trying to share some of the questions. And as you can tell, there are multiple questions that have emerged throughout this first year of Soil Futures with wider publics. And there will be a series of podcasts. At the moment, we are very much in a phase in which we are somehow waiting for more fertile times to be able to develop the different strands of the project and to bring the partners together in a conversation around soil. But I thought I would leave and close the presentation with a few questions that I think have accompanied me personally throughout the whole year. And generally, they have been guiding my work within Arts Catalyst when it comes to environmental crisis. How do we navigate the different temporalities that are entailed in mourning the loss of species and the wider effects of climate change on the planet while taking immediate action? How do we take the time to deep listen and build relationships with humans and non-humans in the context of an emergency? And what knowledges do we need to mobilize, and how do we bridge them within the institutions that we all already inhabit? So if that's okay, Nora, I think I will leave it here and maybe have a conversation with the members of the audience that are there.
It's really great, Anna. Thanks for a lovely presentation and for your timekeeping skills as well. So yes, I would say we have 10 minutes or so for questions and comments. So, and I would like to recommend you for being able to deliver the presentation so well, even though you are not feeling well. So.
No, I have to apologize to Al-Wahat because I was planning to speak at the beginning of the day. Yeah. You know, I was going to give like a few information about the residency, but then now I know that they have been speaking already, so I decided to just skip that that slide altogether. But it's in a way a way to, you know, not paying attention to them. I just wanted to stress that.
And I think it also worked well, given the circumstances, with the fact that we got two different angles on Sakia from the Al-Wahat presentation and from yours, and also a bit more of an impression of the other organizations and activities involved. So thank you so much for that. Questions and comments from the room?
Yeah, Slad, thank you so much for this presentation and like bringing together all these, the diversity of project that you're doing, right? So I'm interested in more concrete examples. For example, if you say there's for example, ask what knowledges do we mobilize? If you very concretely think about a project where it's about healing both the land and the soil together with people, how does it work? You know, do you bring in scientists who've worked in the region, or is it communities, or how? Like, can you be a bit more, specific of what happens in such a collaborative process?
So, in the context of Soil Futures, I feel like that would have been a question that other partners might have been able to answer more specifically, because Arts Catalyst didn't host the residency and everything, and our role within Soil Futures was very much about, you know, holding space for the network and co-organizing the school. So in a way, thinking about ways of knowing and forms of knowledges that other people, contributors to the school, were bringing from the first-hand experience to a cohort of participants. But looking more broadly at Arts Catalyst work beyond Soil Futures, I guess a lot of the work that we have been doing in the past implies working in collaboration with different constituents. So, for instance, we've developed a long-term project, a 5-year project around flooding, in a flooded area along a river in Yorkshire called River Calder. And over 5 years, we worked with medical anthropologists, a number of different artists and members of local communities to try and create together a vision for what a more sustainable way of stewarding and managing the waterways and the water system in the region looked like. So we spent the first year of the project very much trying to formulate the questions that were going to guide the project itself. And we worked very closely with the medical anthropologists in this process of talking to people locally, getting a sense of what their desires for the water system were, and what were the questions that they thought would be relevant to ask in an art project that sought to have an impact on the local community. So we held a number of workshops that implied, like, for instance, baking a cake with like a geological cake of the region, where people could engage with the stratification and the geology of the region itself, and think about the different relationships between the river and the surrounding territory in this very playful way. But all the tools that both the artists and the anthropologists brought in the conversations were ways to somehow stimulate local knowledge and individual perspectives on the issues and possible futures of the water systems. And so after this whole year of meetings and encounters and research that was very much of a participatory dimension, we ended up formulating the key questions of the project that were who owns the water, who looks after it, and who cares for it. And that became a way to then develop a number of different artistic outputs but very much starting from those initial conversations. So there is always this process of, starting from a position of not fully knowing, like having a strong understanding or a strong sense of what areas we want to investigate, but at the same time opening up a context for different voices to come in and to be able to shape where each project goes. And that very much depends on a number of different factors. In that case, we were able to have to sustain a project for 5 years. That might not always be the case, and that very much comes down to funding structures and resources to be able to do that. But in an ideal scenario, we tend to create space for and space and time for those questions to be formulated together with the people that we actually want the project to be beneficial for.
I think something that fascinated me about the Soil Futures project in the first place, Anna, was the inclusion of these Indonesian collectives that are interlinked, as well as the Palestinian organizations. So in the Indonesian context, you also have great challenges of a history of ethnic cleansings. And that's something that they reflect in one of the community interview documentaries that they made, where one of the female teachers within one of the collectives reflects on her starting from hate, having been a victim of such ethnic cleansing, experiencing family members being taken away and so on, and meeting people from the Muslim majority who were responsible for the ethnic cleansing, and realizing that they were also just human beings working away, in a sense. So we considered, when we weren't able to invite the Indonesian partners in, whether we might screen one of those documentaries. And I really recommend that you go home and have a look at them. The other one shows a school that is really set up in order to work with children of farmers on the topics that are relevant to their everyday life. So it's a school of life in a very real sense. We opted not to screen any of those films, primarily because we wanted this day to really be, physically in this space. So the only reason we're doing an online presentation with Anna now is that it was such a last-minute situation that emerged. But there are outcomes of Soil Futures that I think are available digitally to us that I encourage you to have a look at as well. And for the sort of the collective situation in Palestine and in Indonesia, as opposed to the community situation in Palestine, and how that translates into European context, is sort of vital to this project, I think. Yeah. Would you like to reflect on that, Anna?
Yeah, no, it's interesting how we haven't really addressed the question of translation. And I think this is how we conceived the network, and probably this is what will happen in a future stage. But I guess the first year of the network has very much been a way for each organization to delve within their own context, and then there were moments internally for us to come together and share what each organization was developing as part of the network. But in a way, there has never really been, how can I say, like the ambition to translate issues from each specific locality on a wider scale, because we also acknowledge that some of those realities are somehow untranslatable to each other, and they hold the space, the unique space, and the different types of struggles that exist within southern Italy and in Indonesia or in Palestine are completely different to each other. But we still wanted to create a space where we could be able to be in dialogue with each other and create links through the very focus on soil, but primarily on the very focus on being organizations that are committed to an ecological practice with the people that are within the network of each organization, and with the people who are actually doing work on the ground to sustain those very ecologies. But I think there is a question there in relation to translation that we probably haven't addressed yet, and we have structured the network so that there's spaces of autonomy within each of the segments of the network itself.
Yeah, I didn't actually mean to imply that there should be translation across these contexts. Rather, that juxtaposing such different contexts has value in and of itself, because it lifts forth the specificity of each locality. And I think that's also what we wanted to do with the symposium today, to try to include some more context into that kind of conversation in order to reflect on exactly the local, in a sense, right, and the relation to the space in places that are special, that don't compare necessarily to others. Yeah. So I think that's there's no necessarily translation act to be made, but just having some kind of access to those very special and faraway sites is valuable, we feel. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and I guess the dimension of soil reveals so much. I mean, this is, I guess, one of the reasons why within the school we had a few sessions in relation to storytelling, because we really saw the potential for soil as a form of storytelling, or soil as a storyteller, by looking at the condition of aridity of soil in southern Italy, in Puglia at the moment. But by digging within those dimensions, those environmental dimensions, there is a number of different stories connected to the fascist past, or even the feudal system, and how it has how it has remained within the farming system in southern Italy, and the sudden transition from a feudal to an hyper-capitalist system. No, so in a way, the soil becomes has this potentiality to reveal stories that are usually hidden, and that is something that we valued a lot, and that I think throughout the school in particular we were very keen on bringing to the fore.
Great. I think those are lovely final words, unless there are burning questions still from the room. No? Then thank you so much, Anna, for managing to sort of shoulder up in front of the computer despite not feeling quite well. And we will continue the conversation elsewhere, I think, later on. But for now, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and also thank you for accommodating the last-minute change. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye, Anna.
Bye.